Let's talk about some of your castmates on the commish. Okay, I'll mention some of the names, and just give me a reflection about each one. Okay, let's start with Teresa Saldano, Rachel.
Lovely, just supportive and lovely, and I had a wonderful time with Teresa. I think of her often. I wonder how she is. We haven't seen each other in years. We fell out of touch, so. I just really appreciated her. She's solid as a rock, just there every day and a pro.
Okay, Kai Erickson, who played David.
Kai, my first on-camera son, the son I didn't have. Still my friend. I'm in touch with him. We follow each other on Twitter. He's a terrific kid, and he's grown into a wonderful young man.
Jeffrey Knopfs, who played Stan Kelly.
Talent, just a brilliant talent. He's turned into a wonderful writer as well. Dear friend, love Jeffrey.
Melinda McGraw played Sid Madison.
Brilliant, another wonderful actress, and fellow New Englander, Bostonian, witty, smart, just lovely.
And Jason Schaumbing, Ronnie Lopez.
Remains one of our dearest friends, and I have to put him, he and John Seigan are probably the two closest friendships I made out of the commish, who to this day remain very, very dear friends of ours. Jason lives up in Vancouver still, but every time he comes to LA, often he will stay at my house for weeks at a time. My children refer to him affectionately as Uncle Stinky, because he is a stinker.
When you meet fans of the commish after some time has passed now, what do they tell you? What do you hear from them?
Fans of the commish?
Yeah.
There's a warmth and an affection for that show that has remained, particularly women. Women will come up to me and they'll go, I like your work in everything you do, but I love the commish. It's like it's conspiratorial. I get that a lot. Like, almost like, almost like they know they're supposed to acknowledge the Shield or whatever else, but there's this sort of favoritism towards that job. They just loved him, that character. And I was shocked at the people who were fans of that show. Elton John presented himself to me as a fan, and I was like, bleh. And I asked him at one point, I was like, what? You're a fan? I couldn't wrap my head around it. And he just said, look, I'm older now. I don't go out as much now. And on Saturday nights, I stay home and I watch you. And I love you because you make me feel safe. And I was like, wow, that's the way he articulated it to me. And I thought, wow, that's really lovely. Yeah.
When a fan asks you the typical, do you have a favorite episode or story, do you have an answer?
Re the commish?
Yeah.
They don't usually ask if I have a favorite episode. Usually with the commish, maybe it's because it's so long ago now, they ask me if I'm still in touch with people. That's the biggest thing. And the biggest compliments and comments I get about the commish are, you made me feel safe. That seems to be a common thing, particularly with women. They say, you made me feel safe. I loved having you in my house every Saturday night, which is interesting, right? It's an interesting thing it's a phenomenon that happens with television that doesn't happen with film, because you're being allowed into people's houses every week. They want to spend an hour of their time with you. It's an interesting thing. Anyway, that, and who do you still stay in touch with? They ask me about the particular people. And they couldn't believe I was 27 when I started playing that role. So that seems to be the big one, too.
How did the show end? And did you know in advance it was going to come to an end?
Yeah, that's not a great story, actually, because we were, a new president of the network came in, and, this is network television, and he all of a sudden announced that he was moving us on Thursday night at 9 against Seinfeld. And I remember getting on the phone with Steve Kronish, who said to that person at the time, "Why are you canceling my show?" Because, I mean, that was sort of a death knell for a show at the time. You didn't, Seinfeld was a juggernaut. It wasn't. And he said to us at the time, if you do a 15 share against Seinfeld, I will personally come up to Vancouver and shine your shoes. Well, we did a 17, and he canceled us the next day. So I always thought I should have probably sent my shoes down to LA to him, but I didn't do that.
So when the show ended,
Yeah.
did you find yourself typecast at all?
Yeah, I had a tough time during that time. I came down to LA, and everybody in LA thought I was a fat 50-year-old, and which is kind of hard to cast, especially when you're a 33-year-old guy. And I struggled for a while there, and it's one of the reasons I decided to go back to the stage for a little while. I find comfort in the stage. I just love the boards, and I ended up going and doing a Broadway show during that time period.
Defending the Caveman?
Defending the Caveman, yeah.
Which
was a great thing for me to do at the time. It was a one-man show. It was a comedy. It was a successful show, and it was great to go to New York. And New York had transformed in the years that I had moved away. From 90, when I moved away to LA, and then ended up going through this whole odyssey of getting married and having children and living in Los Angeles and then living in Vancouver for 5 years. All of a sudden now in 97, I'm in New York, and New York had been transformed. All of a sudden now Disney had bought up most of Times Square, and instead of 8 shows being lit on Broadway, there were 38 shows lit on Broadway. It was this whole renaissance. So it was, that was when Rent just opened, and I was on Broadway at a time that was really a wonderful resurgence in Broadway, and we saw all the shows, and I was there at the booth, which is a historic house, for a 6-month run, and the show was really, really successful, and we had a wonderful time doing it, and it was just great for my family. My wife and I, we had a great time there in Manhattan. Yeah.
How did you get into doing character voices for Family Guy?
That was a cold call. Seth, I guess, was a fan of The Shield, and he called and asked if I'd be interested in doing it.
Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah, and I loved the show. I thought it was hilarious, and like me, I heard that he was a mimic, and he did most of the voices on the show, and I was sort of interested in that, and I went, and I ended up having a blast, and we did like 5. I did like 5 of them, I think. But it was great, and I really, I knew he was brilliant. I knew he was funny. I just, you just know things, and that's. I watched him working on the show and just thought, wow, this guy's something. He's going to be huge, and so it goes.
Did you do various voices, or did you?
Yeah, I played like I would come to do this character, Big Fat Polly, but then when I was there, Seth would go, well, I need a sailor here, and I need a salesman here, and so I would do like 6 or 7 other voices, just a couple of lines here, a couple of lines there. So I'm peppered throughout those episodes in playing 4 or 5 different people in each one of them. I think I'm billed as one, as Big Fat Polly, but I do 6 of them at least, so it was fun.
So in 2000, you played the great Curly in The Three Stooges.
Yeah.
Was Curly a favorite of yours growing up?
Absolutely. I like my generation in particular. That's when that resurgence of the shorts came out. The Three Stooges shorts were sold. I think Columbia, sold them or bought them, and they became half-hour series. They'd take 3 of them per half an hour, and they'd run them. And for kids like me who would come home from school, run home from school, And it was a depressing day if they ran like 2 Shemps and a Curly Joe. If they didn't run a Curly, like a Curly Howard, it was a drag. It was a bad day. So like that's the way you like determined your day. And I would run home to do that. We of course imitated them and did all their shtick and just howled. And it was really a guy thing. I don't remember any girls being into the Three Stooges at that time. But and when I ever got cast as Curly, it was terrifying, very daunting, especially being from Boston. They were huge there, and I thought, like, I'm not going to be able to go home if I stink this up. If I blow it with Curly, I'm dead, So I really took it to heart and worked very, very hard on that. And I was very proud of the result of the movie. I thought it was very poignant and powerful, and I think that my friend Paul Ben Victor did a wonderful job playing Mo, and Evan Handler did a terrific job playing Larry. And John Cassier did great with Shemp. I felt really good with the performances in the movie, and also I just thought it's a fascinating story. It's a great biopic. But I was also daunted by it because of the whole Wired thing, because I didn't exactly have the greatest experience with that. But at least this one was sanctioned. The first question I asked is the family okay with it? Because I had learned that lesson. And yeah, they were behind it. They were into it. So it was sanctioned, so I was in.
Was that on HBO?
It was ABC.
Oh, ABC, okay.
It was a made for. It was a movie of the week, and Mel Gibson produced it with Icon, his company.
The Stooges, of course, it looked like total mayhem, but it was very orchestrated in the way they did it.
Oh, yeah.
Did you find
absolutely.
in actually having to recreate or do some of the style of the Stooges that it was it more complicated than you thought it might be at all?
Well, I think the trick is that because it's choreographed, you need to really be precise. It's very precision timing, but then you have to bring the energy to it. You can't, it can't feel choreographed. Once you have it choreographed, then you have to bring energy and spontaneity to it as if it's happened for the first time, and that's the real challenge there.
You did a sitcom called Daddy-O. Tell me about that.
One of my favorite jobs I ever had. You know what? And, this is something that happens with actors. People, God bless them, they want to say something. They want to feel like a part of your life or whatever. And sometimes I get people come up to me and they're really wonderful and they'll compliment me and they'll disparage a certain gig. My advice, don't do that. Don't disparage. If a gig wasn't successful or it didn't have a 5-year run or a 10-year run, it doesn't mean it wasn't really, really loved by the actor. And Daddy-O is one of them. And it was a 1-year run. I love that show. I had a great time doing it. I love the people involved. And by the way, I thought it was a good show. The reviews, it got lambasted, this show. And so much to the point where you read it and you go like, are they talking about sweet little benign Daddy-O? I mean... but I was also typecast at that time in my career. I was playing, dead and dying comics and roly-poly affable men, And I really am thrilled that Daddy-O happened because in a way, it sort of embittered me. It made me angry when Daddy-O went down and the way it went down and the whole thing.
You played Chris Woods. What was the basic?
Well, he was a stay-at-home father, and it was a phenomenon that was happening and is still very prevalent. I think it was ahead of the curve because now it's a huge thing. But at the time, they were starting to see these studies coming across that more and more men were leaving the workplace. Women were coming into it more and more, and a lot more men were becoming stay-at-home fathers. So he had lost his job. My wife in the show, played brilliantly by Anita Barone. I think she's just a comic genius. Brilliant actress. In any case, she was a lawyer and was really the breadwinner. So he was like, you know what? I'll stay home with the kids. You're killing it as a lawyer, And it was about what it's like for men in the modern era to not be the breadwinner and to be okay with themselves and not feel like they've lost their manlyhood or whatever, and there's a lot of comedy there, right? So I thought it was very funny, and but it was a soft show. I think what the biggest problem was is that they put us on, again, Seinfeld. They put us on Thursday night, on the adult night. And it was a sort of a how dare you put this sort of benign family show on that lineup, on the Thursday night lineup. And they put us on after Friends. I mean, incidentally, we retained 95% of the lead-in, more than anyone before or after that period. Just saying. But it was sort of like, well, how dare you kind of a thing. Put us this benign sort of family comedy on during the Thursday hipster night. So we got sort of lambasted for that. And then I said, I'm just going to do something that's so hardcore and adult after this. I'm not playing a sweet man ever again. And I was mad. And my wife said, well, if you're going to do that, well, then we have to hold to it. And you have to reinvent your look. You have to, the words she used were, it's not incumbent upon the studios and the networks to reinvent you. It's incumbent upon you to reinvent yourself, which I thought it stuck in my head. It was a brilliant quote. And I just was like, you're right. And so I embarked on this 6-month training program where I shaved my head and I just hit the gym 3 hours a day. And I got in sick shape at that time and just was determined, okay, I'm going to not take a job until I get to play someone in the context of something that's really, really real, naturalistic, hard-hitting, adult material. I'm not doing anything family-friendly anymore. I have to break that mold. I have to, because I knew it was within me to do it. I knew it. But, I understand why in this business, people don't think in these terms, and I highly recommend it. If you're an actor and you're in this business, you have to think about an executive. And if I'm the executive, in charge of a $300 million or $1 billion budget for the season, you tend to compartmentalize and look at things and plug things in the way that they work. So you become a cliche to that person. We need an affable guy. Chiklis will go there. We need a mean guy. So-and-so will go there. You know what I mean? Right. So that's how you get typecast. It's more because the guy or the woman is just looking at a huge palette, and they have to plug people into that. So they can't reinvent you in their head. That's not up to them. So I became determined to present an entirely different person to these people. And I was very fortunate that right at that time when I was really looking to do that, the Shield manifests itself. And I happened to walk into a Gymboree class that my wife dragged me to because we had our second child at the time who was a baby. And, not that I was opposed to going to Gymboree. I'm a wonderful father and very attentive. But that day I didn't want to go. I just didn't. And she dragged me, and there was Kathy Ryan, who my wife happened to know since they were 5 years old. They grew up in Pickwick in North Miami Beach together. And she introduced me to her husband, this bald guy named Sean. So, hey, Sean, how you doing? What do you do? I'm a writer. Oh, that's great. What are you doing? I wrote a pilot that got picked up. It's called The Barn. It's at this network called FX. And I thought, wow, he's doing something about farm animals at a station I've never heard of. That's cool. All right. That's the truth. I did not know what FX was. I kind of did because I had done an interview for them when I was doing the Broadway show in '97. It was some talk soup or something like that. But they basically did reruns of things. FX, right? I thought, oh, that's cute. I was patronizing almost. It was wrong of me, but, well, then I read that script, and I will never forget it in my life. I just thought, this is the best script I've ever read, period. And I need to play this guy.
And I guess you can see right away the barn wasn't a reference to a barn, an actual barn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was the reference to the name of the precinct. They called it the barn.
Right.
Obviously. And then it got changed, the title got changed to Rampart, which all of us hated because it was too on the nose. It was too much of a reference to the Rampart scandals. And then Sean, as he always did, came up with the perfect thing, which was the perfect title, which was The Shield. And it had that double entendre, and it was perfect. And the rest is history in that area.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that history. So you actually getting the role? Did you have to audition?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the people around me at the time, because remember I had come off the Shield, off the commish, and then I did Daddy-O, which only ran for a year, but I was a network guy. And the only cable at that time really was HBO and Showtime that was viable. And so I was looking for the right job. And my wife and I were writing this script about a rogue cop as a feature film for me to redefine, right? And when The Shield came up and I sent it to my reps, they were like, all right, well, we'll try to pull an offer. But they want you to read. And I was like, no, I'm going to read for this. And they were like, absolutely not. You're a network television star. They should offer this to you. And I was like, have you read this? And they're not going to offer this to me because they think of me as, the industry thinks of me as this other guy. And we're lucky here. Sean doesn't know my work. You know what I mean? He knows me as the guy, this sort of hard guy that walked into Gymboree. And he doesn't know me, And that was a godsend because I believe that if The Shield was at any of the networks, I would not have gotten the job. They would have passed on me out of hand and not even let me read for it. So I knew I had to earn the role. I knew I had to win it. And there's a lot of value in that. When you win something, then everybody's mind is set at ease. Then we could all then go shoulder to shoulder and walk together as opposed to, being at odds or having them worry about it. They knew. So I went in and I read for Sean and Clark Johnson, and then they brought me to network. And I remember, and I've told the story before, but it's true, when I was in, there was me and one other guy. When I went to network, and I knew that Kevin Riley and Peter Liguori were in there, and I knew that Sean was in there, and the casting director and the reader. And all of a sudden, I just became infuriated. I just thought, they're not going to let me have this. They're not going to let me do this. They think they know who I am. I don't know why I thought this, but it just enraged me. And I just thought, well, if nothing else, I'm just going to make them fear me. That was probably fortuitous that I had that feeling because I went in there very, very heightened. And I can only imagine that it made them sort of go what's going on here, because I came in with a certain level of energy. And it worked out. And I got the job. And then I turned it on them. And now that I was offered the job, I said to Kevin and Peter at the time, I very distinctly remember saying, look, are we going to make this? Because if we go to work and the pink pages come in and this is not this, and it's now the softened version and that's pulling back, I'm going to quit. I don't want it. I need this to be this. And Peter very coolly said, no, we'll go further, if anything. We need to compete with HBO. That's the mandate, and we're going to swing for the fence, and we'll either land on our asses or we'll be the heroes of the world, but nothing in between. And we swung.
So the pilot, the script, was it close to what was on the air? The language,
Exact, or better. I mean, whatever tweaks that were made were better. The notes were very astute, very grown up, very smart.
How long did it take to shoot the pilot?
9 days, 11 days, 11 days. 11 working days, if I recall correctly. I'm pretty positive, yeah.
When you were there in Vic's shoes, playing that for the first time,
Yeah.
what do you remember about that?
I remember it being probably singularly the most thrilling 2 weeks of my life, because it's so hard to explain to people when everything aligns in the way that The Shield did, where you have an incredible piece of material, when you have an amazing ensemble around you. Everything, the sets, everything was right. Everything was right, and you knew it. And I was at a place in my life where I appreciated it too. I had been through a lot up to that point. I had some success and some failures. I had scares. I had all different kinds of life experience that led me to this time. So I appreciated it thoroughly. And it was just a great headspace to be in on the onset of that show. And these people that the late great Scott Brazil, who was the executive producer of The Shield, they put him with Sean because Sean had never executive produced a show before. And Sean was an auteur and a great writer, but he didn't know about the nuts and bolts and mechanics of running a show. So they put an Emmy Award-winning, wonderful guy, Scott Brazil, with him. And he brilliantly, put together this cast and crew with Sean. And I said to him once when I was at a downtime, like in the second season of the show, because I was starting to produce. And I said to him, what's your criteria for doing a show? And he said, well, I start with a fundamentally decent human being. You have to be a fundamentally decent human being to work with me. And then you have to be really, really talented. If you're the most talented person in the world and you're a jerk, you don't get the job. If you're, conversely, if you're a wonderful, wonderful person and you stink, you don't get the job. So, fundamentally decent human being, really, really talented. If you meet those two criteria, you get the gig. And then you have a bunch of like-minded individuals going toward the same goal. That's when things happen. That's when great things happen. Because you got a bunch of professionals who are really talented going toward the same thing. And that's what happened on The Shield. That's what we were. And it was like that for 7 years. And people know at this point, they know, because it's so many years after the show's been over, we still speak so highly of each other because it really was that gig. It was. It was a beautiful job. And we coveted it. It's like the guys, you'll know, the guys at Breaking Bad. They loved each other. They had respect for each other. It's reflected in the work. You see it on the screen. It's palpable. And it was that way from front to back. And I know what that's like because you don't want the bar to drop. You never want to be the guy to drop the ball yourself. And everybody's sort of there to catch each other and hold each other up. And it was that way from the first day to the last day. As a matter of fact, I think we ended that show as strong, or if not stronger, than it began. And that's a matter of pride. That's a great, piece of personal pride for me and everybody involved in that show. That we all feel like we share that together and no one can take it from us.
People talk about the stars aligning and things that are meant to be. You said that you had been through a lot. Was there a moment where you went, God, I've been sort of prepping for this thing and didn't even know it? You talked about, getting lean, and you and your wife had been working on a project about a similar kind of a cop. Did that hit you at one time going, this is that this is like timing you couldn't even try to duplicate?
I was so aware of all of that. That's the thing that I think made it even better, because, so often in life, hindsight is 20/20.
Right.
Like, I think one of the biggest things I take away from the commission is that I didn't realize what I had when I had it. You get so caught up in the moment and youth, and you're just not as smart when you're younger. You just aren't. You don't have the experience, and so many lessons. And the Shield, I was 37. I was a grown man. I had made a lot of mistakes. I had done a lot of things right and well. All these different experiences, again, had led to this seminal moment in my career and my life. And everything aligned. And I was aware of it. And that made it all the sweeter, all the more special. And it wasn't like all the people around me in that show were the same. Like CCH Pounder had been around a long time. Walton and Kenny, everybody in that, they were all seasoned pros, salty. We all had been around, suffered losses, all of it. And by the way, people don't know this about a television series too. When you do 7 years, that's a slab of your life. That's a significant portion of your life. And you go through births and deaths and marriages. And, Scott Brazil contracted and passed away from ALS in the middle of doing The Shield, which was heartbreaking and devastating for us. But it also brought us together. I saw my friends on that show get married, have children. You see divorces. It's a piece of your life, and it's hard to explain because you bond in a way that's different than, I think, than people who work at an office 9 to 5. It's just different. You're going through extremes with each other. You're seeing each other raw. 6 in the morning, women walk in, no makeup. It's who they are. They're here. Hi, here I am. And you see each other in a way that's you laid bare to each other, and you love each other, really. It's a great thing.
Was Vic Mackey based on any real person? You know of? A composite or anything?
He's a composite. I can't say he's one person. I shy away from exactly who he is because, if you watch the show, that you could take great offense at being compared with Vic Mackey, or you could be kind of flattered by it, depending on, I think the primary people who he is, to me, know, But yeah, there's certain people that I definitely pulled from.
What about the name? Was that just an invention, or?
Yeah, it was that was Sean's invention. Mackey. I think it's a great name. Vic Mackey is an iconic name, isn't it? I don't know. It's just a tough guy name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just rings right. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the character. What do you see? And there's a little perspective now, being away from the show, but what do you see as Vic's strengths?
Well, they're glaring, aren't they? I mean, great instincts, amazing perception. He understands who he's hunting. Strength, like real, like bodily strength. Also, an amazing capacity to compartmentalize, which is both his tremendous strength and fault, because it's sociopathic. I mean, he's able to do these incredibly horrible things and sort of place them in a compartment over here and live with it. But he's not soulless. He's not a sociopath in that he does feel remorse. He feels regret. But it's an interesting mentality. I loved exploring it. I've done it now, so I don't feel the need to really, revisit it. But I remember we shot the pilot for the Shield in June of 2001. We were picked up on my birthday, August 30th, 2001, and then 2001 was 9/11. And that made us all stop and say, are we really going to do this show about this corrupt cop when we just saw images of the most heroic police running into buildings and perishing? And I think we all took a beat and we went, yeah, absolutely. Because now the thematic question was initially, what are we willing to accept from law enforcement to keep us safe? Now becomes, even more significantly, what are we willing to accept from law enforcement in post 9/11 America to keep us safe? So it became even more resonant. And it's amazing how people took sides, and I knew we were onto something. This has happened. When I got the pilot, the first edit of the pilot, the rough cut, they sent it to my house. And we were having a barbecue at my house at that time. And I said, guys, I just got the pilot. You want to see it? There were like 20 people there. And we put it on the screen at my house, and we screened it. And the moment I shot Terry at the end of the episode, one of my friends turned and went, oh my God, you're a villain. And my other friend went, wait a minute, whoa, he's not a villain, that guy's a rat. And they started vehemently fighting. And I just sat there going, wow, here it is, And they almost came to blows. They were passionate about it. And I just thought, wow, we're on to something here. And I just knew this was gonna affect people. Going back to, I wanted to entertain people and make them think and feel. I might as well have been a pig rolling around in slop right then.
Well, there's no fooling around about establishing a character, that's for sure, and a pilot. When when those kind of things happen, I mean,
where do you go from here? Yeah.
Well, even the first 5 minutes, but then as it just resolves like that. Yeah. What about Vic's weaknesses? What do you think they were?
Well, a little chink in the armor there when you're willing to murder a fellow officer. I mean, he's, when someone is able to justify the most heinous of deeds, for some ideology, that's a major weakness. That's a big flaw.
Is that a blind spot, you think?
Blind, yeah.
His character?
Yeah. Yeah. That's an understatement, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. He murders a guy in the first episode. And frankly, I think it's amazing to me that people's ability to compartmentalize, and I've witnessed it Forrest Whitaker, when he did The Fifth Year, he would become so angry, not angry, confounded. I think he'd like come up to me and just go like, they hate me. They hate me. Like people are like yelling at me on the street, like leave Mackie alone. I'm like, I'm the good guy here, I'm trying to get this murderer, and he couldn't wrap his head around it. It was freaking him out. And it was something that we would look at like, wow, this guy, they just root for him. And it's because of this notion that he was doing it for the greater good. And if that was the bottom line, is that he did these things. If you were a citizen, you had nothing to fear from Vic Mackey. But if you were a bad guy or disloyal, then you had everything to fear from him. And that there's something about that at a very basic human level that resonates with people, that affects them deeply. People want to believe in loyalty, and they want to believe in a hero or someone who can face the most horrible among us and fight it. The whole story of Vic Mackey is in A Few Good Men is the guy Nicholson's talking about, the guy on the wall that he references in the monologue. That's Vic Mackey, who he is. He's the guy that no one wants to talk about. That, you know, we sit on our easy chairs and live our lives, but there's a guy out there, there's guys in SEAL Team 6 who do the dirty work. And those guys are a different breed of human being. And so it's sort of epic, the whole thing, and fascinating for people. But it's interesting to me that people can, I'm sorry to just keep going on, but it's interesting to me that people can justify all manner of heinous deed if they believe that the guy's heart is in the right place.
Well, it was a tense show to watch, but it had humor, sometimes at the expense of other characters. What was it like actually going into work every day and playing him? Was it fun? Was it difficult? Was it all of those things?
Well, everything, yeah. It was just, I would wake up 15 minutes before my alarm clock every day. I couldn't wait to go to work. I was just you just didn't know what was going to happen, but you knew something was going to happen. It was going to be exciting, and it was going to be heart-wrenching, and it was going to be devastating. I came home so wrung out, and it was just an amazing time, incredible, from a working experience and familial too. I mean, it's sort of a trust exercise. My God, we would come at each other, and we just gave each other that permission. I mean, like there are scenes where I strike Walton Goggins, and I hit him, and I mean, but he knew I hit him in a particular way, and I wouldn't hurt him, and we just trusted each other, and that's something you earn, and that's something that, but when you have it amongst each other, and it's ironclad, and no one's breaching that trust. Oh, it's hard to describe. It's an amazing time, amazing thing.
So the tone of the show was set like in the first 5 minutes of the pilot.
Yeah.
Knowing that, did you ever get the script and you were surprised by what was going to happen, or were you kind of prepared for
every
anything?
single week? I think that's probably the single most incredible thing about the experience. And that's where I have to just always tip my hat to Sean Ryan and that group of writers. As brilliant as Sean is, one of his greatest brilliant choices about The Shield was the other writers he put around himself. Remember I mentioned me wanting all the other actors to be great? Well, Sean's that way too. He's brilliant. He put a lot of brilliant writers around him. So remember, this Kurt Sutter and just name the list of writers that are on The Shield throughout the entire 7 years. And it's the who's who of television writers today. Glenn Mazzara, Scotty Rosenbaum, all these guys are powerhouses. They're incredible showrunner writers in their own right. They run the greatest shows on television right now, Sons of Anarchy and The Walking Dead, and it was just amazing, right? So what was thrilling to us is we would all get our scripts and run into our respective trailers, dying to read what happened. And not once in 7 years, not once was I like, did I read a script and go, never. That's like next to impossible. I mean, that's when you have that kind of volume of work, 98 scripts, not one of them sucked, not one of them. That's crazy. That's insane. It just doesn't happen. And then, we were just bringing things to the dance to enhance them, to try to make them that much better, But on the page, they leapt off the page, every one of them. That's what's extraordinary to me. Can we stop? I need to use the men's room again. Sorry, I'm